Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Before we start the presentation, just a quick announcement. I extend the deadline for the assignment to April 15. So I think that should give you enough time to finish off if you haven't done with the training. So that's gonna be the final extension for the assignment too. So be sure to finish off or wrap up your experiment before April 15. Okay. Okay, all right. Wei, are you there? If you're here, you can start the presentation and share the screen. Thank you.
Okay, Professor. Hello, can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, and I will begin. Today I'm going to talk about this paper, DeepOpt, medical report generation for retina images via deep models and visual explanation. And basically, the outline of this presentation will be like this. First, I will just simply introduce some backgrounds, and then I will talk about the main contribution of this paper, and finally, the evaluation and conclusion. So, to begin with, I will give you some needed background information. What is retina? So retina is a thin layer of tissue on the inside back wall of your eye. So it is very important to a person because our eyes need it. So it contains millions of light sensitive cells and nerve cells that is needed for our visual information. So for the retina of people, there are some kind of diseases called retina diseases, and it will cause the visual symptoms. For example, like the blurred visions or lost vision, and there are some examples of the retina diseases, just like optical neuritis. They will cause some swelling or inflammation damages of the optical nerve, and also there are other different kind of disease examples. And for the retina diseases, doctors will have some treatment for these kind of diseases. So this is a basic framework of the patient comes to a doctor for treatment. So the doctor will just use several diagnoses, different modality diagnosis to help this patient. For example, he will use some biomedical instrument or visual clinic diagnosis or some text to help him and help this patient to conduct some treatment. And also in this treatment, the doctor will give a very simple report, medical report, and it will illustrate what this retina disease is. And maybe it has a label A. Also, it will have some specific symptoms in this medical report. So this is just background of what we need today. So you may ask, and this paper, the main motivation of this paper is that how can we use AI to improve the retinal diseases treatment? So this is the main motivation or main the aim for this paper to solve. And now I will talk about the main contribution of this paper. The first contribution is the dataset contribution. So as you can see, there is a no very large retinal image dataset. So the first contribution of this paper is they propose a large scale retinal images dataset. They call it DeepINet, DEN in short, and this fig is an example of each instance. For example, it will give an image of a retina, and it might have some disease, and also some ophthalmologists means doctors will label these images. Maybe they can give the name of this disease, or they will give some keywords to illustrate this disease. And also there are some clinical description of this disease. And so each instance for this data set will be like this. So there is an image and a name, keywords, and a description. And this data set is very large. And the author also showed the comparison of this data set with other data sets. And in this table, we can see that this proposed data set, then DeepINet, has much more images than other data sets. So this is actually a very huge contribution for this domain. And also, this data set includes the labeled image and text. And also, there are some other analyses of this data set, like the author, just show the word length distribution of the keyword and the clinic description. So we can find out that most of the lengths are smaller than 20 words. So this means this data set won't cause much computational burden for the natural language processing part. And also they have some description of these keywords, and they show it in the word cloud form. And so based on this data set, the other part is that how can we use this data set to enable AI to help the doctor assist for diagnosis for those patients with the retinal diseases. So the second main contribution of this paper comes to the AI-based diagnosis. So this is a framework overview of this paper proposed model. So given input retina image like the left, and then it includes 3 different components to process the data set instance. The first is retina disease identifier. The second is clinical description generator. And the third is the DNN visual explanation module. So based on these 3 different modules, the model can achieve different targets, can also achieve different goals. And I will explain these 3 components in more details in the following sections. So the first is the retina disease identifier. So as you can see from the name, the RDI is to finish the classification task. So given the retina image, they want to find out what the disease is. So it is actually a classification task. And the RDI component is basically used you use 2 different setups base models. The first is ResNet and the other is VGG. So the first use these 2 models as the base models, and they pre-trained these 2 models on the ImageNet, and then fine-tune on the DeepINet data set. So actually this for this component, also gave 2 base models. So it means there are 2 different versions of this component. And to finish the classification task, to identify the what kind of retinal disease is. And okay, for the second part, as you can see, the second part of this proposed model is the clinical description generator. So we can actually can see from the meaning of the title. So this part aims to generate the clinical description of the for the retina image. As I mentioned before, each instance includes an image and a keyword and the clinical description. So this part aims to generate the clinical description for those retina image. And the main architecture will be like this. So it is actually not very not complicated, and they mainly include two parts for the encoding, and then use RNN STM for the decoding. So there is a given the retina image as a raw input, they use a pre-trained CNN for the image feature extraction. In this part, the author gives 4 versions of a model. So they use OpenNet, VGG, 16, VGG 19, and Inception V3 for the features extraction. So for this part, it has 4 different setups. And so this part is the image part. And for the hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, sorry. And for the another party, the keywords encoding. So each instance of the DEN, the DeepINet, includes the keywords. So the author also use the keywords to encode the word information and use a word embedding module. The word embedding module aims to extract the keywords feature, and the main the embedding way is the use the bag of words as an embedding way. So after embedding these two feature, and he will use the fuse the feature contact those two features, and then input this feature into the RNN-LSTM model. So they use LSTM model to sequentially generate the clinical description. So this is the second part of the proposed model, the clinical description generator. So basically, the first two components, one is to predict the disease label, and the other is to generate the description for the disease. And the third part of this proposed model is the visual explanation module. As you can see from this name, its aim is very clear. So it wants to give some the explainable items for this model. So they use the class activation mapping as the basic technique. And this part, so you may ask what this part will do. So this part will highlight the discriminative object parts in the CNN. So I will give a very simple example to illustrate this part. So as you can see in this fig, this is a raw image of instance. And then if we use the CNN for classification to predict, so we can highlight, we can use different colors to highlight different parameters. So we can see this color in red are actually have more. We need to pay more attention to it because it might be the diseases part, and for the other part, it may be not very, that important. So this is kind of a visual, visualization part for the in the CNN model, so this part can provide some explainable items for this model, and also the generation, the final medical report generation it will be organized as tables. So they will predict the name of the disease, means the class of the disease, and generate some description, and also give some the class activation mapping to for explainability.
And then let's come to the evaluation part. So for these three different components of the proposed model, they use different experiments to verify their effectiveness. So for the first, the retinal disease identifier, as I mentioned before, they use two different setups as a base model. One is ResNet, the other is VGG. So they also conduct two different kind of experimental settings. One is random init. Random init means the model are initialized randomly. So pre-trained means these models are pre-trained on the ImageNet. So we can see that actually the pre-trained model has better performance than random init, and VGG is better than the ResNet. So actually we can find the effectiveness of the pre-trained operation on the retinal disease identifier. And for the clinical description generator, we can use this table to show the performance. And as I mentioned before, they are used 4 different setups to compose this generator. And also we notice there is 2 different settings. One is non-keyword driven. So as I mentioned before, this part, the CDG component, encodes both the image and the keywords. So for this part, they will not use the keywords encoding, and for this part, they will use the keywords for encoding. So actually, we can see there is a very large performance gain after using the keyword as the encoding. This is quite intuitive because the generated description is basically use the keywords to extend the original text. So it is quite intuitive for this improvement. And also they give a very simple case to illustrate the CDG part. And we can say the ground truth for this image is here, and is a 67-year-old female, blah blah. And for this instance, the ground truth is here. So the generated description, clinical description, will be like this. And we can see that there is very both of them are kind of similar. Also, there is another phenomenon the author mentioned, that the age and gender are very hard to predict. So you see there, you see this instance is predicted correctly. The author say that they are varying chances. So they are very the actual age and gender are very hard to predict. And this is also quite intuitive because maybe it is very hard to identify the gender from just a retina image, right? And finally, they also conduct experiments to verify the class activation mapping part. So as you can see in these 3 rows pictures, and the first part is the raw image, and with a yellow sketch to highlight the lesion areas. So we can see from these images that the yellow lines, the yellow lines curves stand for the lesion areas, means the areas that might cause the disease. So so this is actually the important areas we need to care about. So we want our model to identify these areas. So this paper conduct 2 different setups experiments. The first is fine tuning on the DEN dataset. As I mentioned before, the first pre-trained on the ImageNet, and then fine tuning on the DEN dataset. So for the row B, they are the results fine-tuned on the DeepINet dataset, and row C, they are not fine tuning on the DeepNet dataset. So we can observe that, in red part, they are very, overlap with the yellow line. So, and for this image, you can see the red part. So the attentive we should pay attention to is not align with the yellow sketch. So, and for this part, we can also see this phenomenon. So this kind, show the effectiveness of the fine tuning on the DeepINet dataset. And yeah, that's the basic evaluation of this paper. And finally, let's come to the conclusion. So basically, this paper has different contribution. The main contribution may be in two aspects. The first is a very large DeepINet. They build a data set from the handcraft. They led doctors to for the labels. This is a very important work, and also they propose AI-based methods to automatically generate medical reports. These might help the doctors to cure the patients. And the experiments has showed the improved performance of their proposed part in this model, and this is actually a very complete work, and very I conduct comprehensive experiments. So it seems to be very meaningful. And thanks for listening. So is there any question, any problem?
Okay, so I'll just let the student first ask the questions.
Okay.
Okay, anyone?
I could ask one. Is this an older paper? Because I noticed that you said they used an LSTM over. I keep hearing transformers all the time nowadays, so I'm curious if this was just before they had hit.
Actually, this paper will not seems not to use transformer. I don't know the specific reason, but I guess maybe the transformer is kind of computational, has some computational burden. So as you can see, this paper includes most of the model in this paper are very simple and very mature. So they might not include those newly proposed model like transformers for the clinical description generation. Yeah.
When is the paper published?
I'm sorry. Maybe it's about 20. So sorry. I need to check it out. Sorry.
Yeah.
It's 2020.
Is it which
No.
conference? In which conference?
It's the IEEE WACV.
Okay. Okay, I see. All right. Yeah, maybe you can reshare the slides. Maybe there's other questions regarding the method.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? Not just questions, maybe comments. Yeah, wait, first of all, what do you think about the paper? Like the weakness and the strength?
Okay, actually, I think the strength of this paper is the data set contribution. I think the building a data set is very hard work. It's a hard work. So I think the main contribution is the data set. But
Mhm.
for the model part, I don't think they are very fancy, and I think most of them are adopt the existing work like ResNet, like
Yeah.
VGG. So
Yeah.
I don't find some novel part for the
Mhm.
model for the models, but I think the data set contribution is a actual contribution. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so I think everyone, probably will agree on this point, right? So in terms of the methodology, I don't see there's anything, particularly new. Basically, these three components are very clear, trying to address what they are trying to solve. For each of the part, the 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 method they are using, basically they are using off-the-shelf techniques or baselines, right? For classification, description generation, as well as the visual explanation. So I don't see any, new stuff, or they propose any new things trying to address maybe some of the challenges for their newly collected data set. So I think that's the main weakness of their paper. Although, they introduced the new data set, but the technical part is pretty weak for, by looking at their entire framework. And for the data set itself, it seemed like they only increased the size, right? The number of images,
Yeah.
like 10 times, maybe larger than some of the existing. Like the reference 13, they have 1200, right? They basically maybe improve the, increase the data set size by 10 times. But I mean, yeah, large scale data set may help, but why is it necessary to have a larger data set for this domain? It is not very clear, right? What's the motivation for curate another new data set? Based on these attributes, I don't see anything new, like the field of view, like 30 degree to 60 degree. Some of the data set also have like has a range of degrees, right? Like 43, 21. Maybe their field of view is larger, like cover like 30 degrees. Maybe this is one, benefit, maybe useful for some of the diagnosis for the retinal diseases. And the resolution is various. Maybe this is could be one potential challenge, or maybe beneficial for some of the real world application, right? They may be different, equipment, imaging equipment, right? They taking those retinal images at different resolutions. So for this new data set, they have various resolutions kind of cover diversity, right? So when you train the model, then may be able to adapt or generalize to different resolutions. That could be one plus. But for the other data set, it seems like there's other, other data set also have some, at least multiple resolutions. Image plus text. What is the star here mean? So for their data set, like two different types, like keyword plus description, is that? So trying to see what's the difference as compared to the previous one.
Okay. The star here means they have both the keywords and the description.
Okay.
So previous data type may be only include the keywords but not the full the description.
Okay, I see. Yeah, maybe this is another, plus for their data set, right? They have this kind of rich texture info description for the disease that maybe can, provide actual benefit in terms of diagnosis, generate those AI report. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think overall, I mean, this data set, I think it's definitely valuable for this field. definitely will benefit from a large scale data set if you have a machine deep learning model. But the challenge, or maybe other aspect of the data set is not clear, right? What are the unique challenge for this data set as compared to previous ones? And so I think this one is not clear. And in terms of method, maybe they should, develop something new, right? Specifically address some of the challenge it has for this new data set. So that's the my overall feedback for the paper.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think this field is, these kind of AI report generation is interesting and definitely has a lot of, practical need, right? The doctors maybe have to diagnose a lot of cases on the daily basis. These AI model, by generating some maybe initial report, right? Like you mentioned, the age and the gender will be very challenging to predict correctly, which is, understandable, right? There's maybe not very obvious patterns to distinguish between male and a female, right? And also how to distinguish the age, not like for the face, right? The human face, there are some distinctive features that, the machine learning model is able to recognize and trying to differentiate, different ages. But for the retina image, maybe those kind of features are not present or very difficult to kind of identify. So for this AI report, maybe trying to focus on capturing some of the description or attribute of the disease itself. But for these kind of hard to predict attribute like the patient information, a lot of electronic health record, right? They have this information, right? When the patient admit to the hospital, the name, gender, age, those basic information are there. So it's not necessary to ask the AI machine learning model to predict that, or maybe the doctor can correct these kind of basic information. So I don't think this will be something presented like a challenge we should try to solve, which very easy to correct. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, but I think, one thing to learn, maybe it's good to know they have this large scale data set. And if anyone interested in doing this kind of retina image analysis, maybe this is one, data set, large scale data set we can look into. Or maybe you are doing, this can be served like a, large scale data set for pre-training, right? If you are analyze a retina image for other purpose, right? Maybe segmentation or whatever, maybe this, or maybe predicting a different disease, maybe this data set can use as a pre-trained data set for this kind of purpose. Okay. I don't know if you guys noticed, one thing is counterintuitive is the two baseline they use, VGG and the ResNet, and they show VGG performs better than ResNet, which is kind of counterintuitive, right? Because we know in general image classification, ResNet is better than VGG. And do they explain the reason for that?
I'm not sure they explain the reason, so maybe I need to check it out very carefully too.
Yeah, because this one is kind of counterintuitive because ResNet definitely, like for various data set, is show better performance than VGG. I don't know if they didn't train it to the converge, or there's something thing wrong with the training. But yeah, definitely that's that catch my eyes. I have a question about that. Okay, all right. Any Any other questions or comments, thoughts? Okay, if not, yeah, we're gonna go to the second presentation. So Wei, thanks again for the presentation. And yeah, please, submit the slides so I can do the grading. Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, all right, let's go to the second presentation.
Can you see my slides? Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Michael, I can see your slide.
Hi, my name's Michael Fielder. The paper I'll be presenting today is Unified 2D and 3D Pre-Training for Medical Image Classification and Segmentation. So just a quick outline of the presentation. I'll be going over the general overview and the specific contributions that the authors of the paper said they made with this paper, and then an overview of the model, the experimentation and ablation studies that they performed, the conclusion that they gave, and then my personal criticisms and overall paper rating. So I'll start with the overview. Self-supervised learning opens up opportunities to utilize unlabeled data. So the idea is that you provide a model with unlabeled data, and then over time, without your supervision or on its own, is able to learn different things about the data. So this is very useful specifically for medical imaging because of the label scarcity. We hear time and time again how labels are hard to come by in medical imaging because they either they might be for a rare disease, or because the in order to make these data points, you need to have an expert finding out information. So traditionally, self-supervised learning methods are dimension specific in that they can only compute 2D or 3D data types exclusively. So that is a big pitfall for these self-supervised learning methods, especially when you want to use a ton of data. You would hope that you could use both 3D and 2D data simultaneously to train the model. So the idea for this paper is to create a self-supervised learning pre-training method that can compute both 2D and 3D data. So here's a figure provided by the paper. On the left are previous methods. So the idea is that you pass in a 2D data set to pre-train the of unlabeled data types to a 2D model. And then it learns through some self-supervised learning task. And then this model is then edited slightly and then used to fine tune a 2D model for some downstream objectives. So in this case, you would only be able to provide it with 2D images, and in the bottom example, 3D volumes. So their model suggests that hopes that we can put 2D and 3D images or data types together into a universal model that can be used to fine tune both 2D and 3D downstream tasks. So that's, if they succeed with this, it would be a huge deal. So they provide two specific contributions. First is the USST framework, which attempts to learn general representations via self-supervised learning pre-training. And the second is slice volume consistency, which is a mechanism that when applied to their framework is able to look at the global representation of a 3D data type in its 3D representation, like for example, an MRI, while also looking at the local features, that being the specific slices. So it can gain valuable information from both aspects of the data type. So that would also be a big thing if they were able to do it. So here, before explaining the model, I have to explain what a pyramid vision transformer is, which is what they use a lot in their model. And this was created as a backbone for multiple vision tasks that regular vision transformers aren't able to handle. So a lot like a convolution, it reorientates its input into different shapes in order to mimic a pyramid structure. So this is a lot like a convolution where you can get different shapes as the image is passed through different layers. So the idea is that when it comes out of another layer, its size is reduced and lengthened so that the patch sizes are different. So it's able to view multiple different patch sizes throughout training, while as a regular vision transformer only is able to view one type of patch size. So this simulates what a convolution might do to an image. So it kind of has the best of both worlds. And so normally it's passed through a patch embedding, reshapened, and then passed through transformer encoder. And then on the other end, it ends up being from this size to this size. So here is a general overview of the USST architecture. And so one of the novel things that they created was a pyramid transformer, which I will be exploring later. But this is the, in order to execute the self-supervised learning task, it uses a parent-teacher model, which is very common in self-supervised learning, where the idea is that you have a sample passed in, and then two manipulations are passed, two unique manipulations are passed to the images. And so the loss is calculated between their two guesses. So through this, without having a label, it's able to gain valuable information about the images over time. And so this kind of pre-training helps in learning valuable information that can be used to speed up training and gain higher accuracies. So yeah, here's the basic overview of it. And just one thing to note is that the loss is different depending on what task you're doing. For 2D images, it is a cross entropy loss. And for 3D images, as I'll explain in a second, it's a little bit different. So yeah, so here's just the basic overview, very simple parent-teacher model. And one thing to note is that the teacher model doesn't actually learn, and instead is just a exponential running average of the weights present in the student path. And the student path is what is going to be used to perform the fine-tuning downstream tasks. So this is the slice volume.
Michael?
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry to interrupt. So I think, can you go back to the previous slide?
Sure, this one?
What is the teacher path and the student path? Like, what are the two different? What are the difference between these two paths? Like teacher.
So the two differences is that traditionally in a self-supervised learning task, right? So the idea is that the teacher model is does not learn. And so it gets its updated weights specifically through the student path. So it serves as a ground truth, as they explain in the paper, that it serves as a ground truth representation of an unlabeled image. And so over time, the loss is minimized through when both of these models are able to guess a correct image or guess the correct class, for example. So from what I understand, they don't fully understand why this works. It's a little bit weird, but it just happens to work that way, where you can use two separate manipulations of an image, maybe adding noise or flipping it or something like that, and then it's able to learn specific features about the image. I hope I explained that.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so for a 3D image, they talk about the slice volume. I'm sorry, I forgot the slice volume similarity, or where the idea is that you have a 3D volume and where you can look at both the 3D volume and the 2D slices at the exact same time. And so for the slices, it takes the average values of an M amount of slices from two perturbations to the images, and then a complicated loss is calculated where it looks at the volumes to the slices and the volumes and so forth, and adds all of these losses up together. And one thing to also note is that these right here are actually patch tokens, very similar to the VIT patch tokens found in the original Vision Transformer, where these are passed along with the other patches and serves as the exclusive output. So if I go back here, you can see that's the SSL token, and it's passed through the model at different points and then serves as the exclusive output. And so then this is passed into a projector, which is just a multi-layer perceptron that predicts some kind of end task. So other than that, yeah, I'll move on to the specific layers. And so each one of these layers is actually a pyramid transformer that was shown before. And this is considered a pyramid vision transformer U-net. So the idea is that it works very similarly to a regular U-net in that, and the reason that they do it this way is that by having an encoder and a decoder, you can perform a lot of different tasks, right? So for example, with an encoder decoder, you can perform image segmentation, and with just the encoder, you could perform classification. So it makes it a lot more robust. And so another thing that they created was a switchable patch embedding. So in the original pyramid transformer, this was just a regular linear embedding, but in this case, they had to change it in order to handle 2D and 3D inputs. And so one thing to note is that this layer or this patch embedding is different depending on whether it's in the encoding or the decoding layer. In the decoder layer, it progressively downsamples the feature map, and in the decoder layer does the opposite and upsamples it, and it does this through a switchable transpose convolutional layer. And so it's a little complicated. I don't quite understand it, but the idea is that it upsamples and downsamples it depending on where it's found in the network. And so the other thing to mention is that they also have the spatial reduction, which is found in the pyramid vision transformer. And in this case, they reduce the key and value pairs to speed up computation because of the differing feature maps in a vision transformer. And so as you can also see the SSL token being passed through each layer and interacting with the other patches through multi-head attention. And then this is the sole output that is passed at the end of, for example, the decoder. So I think that's all that needs to be explained there. And just to reiterate, each of these is a pyramid vision transformer instead of, for example, a convolutional neural network layer. So the next thing to mention too is that they have optimization for handling the input. So the idea is that there is this V step, and this represents a training split. So the idea is that the best way of handling the input of 2D and 3D images is to alternate between the two. And for example, if the V value is 2 here, then 2 steps will run 2D images and 2 steps will run 3D volumes during training and so forth. And the idea behind this is that you have to be very careful about what you select for V, because if the value is too high, then you might learn valuable information gained from the 2D images when training the 3D volumes for a very long time. And if it's too low, you might not have enough time to train on one modality. So that's just another thing they explored. So onto the experimentation. The pre-trained data sets that they train on, they have over 5,000 3D CT scans from 5 data sets, which are provided here, and then over 100,000 2D images from a chest X-ray data set. And so these are used to train the USST model, pre-train it for self-supervised manner. Oh, and one more thing I'd like to mention about the model is that when it's passed for these down sampling or these more fine-tuned tasks, the idea is that you're going to take this student path and reorganize it so that the last layers of it, which is commonly done in transfer learning, to make it able to guess a specific task. But the idea is that through pre-training, it's learned some valuable information about how to look at data. So to move on, these are the downstream data sets that are used for fine-tuning evaluation. And so there's a couple different tasks from everything from 2D X-rays to CT scans to MRIs. So there's a lot of different data sets being used in experimentation. So the first thing they looked at was how important is it to look at 2 different modalities for pre-training. And so what they did is that they passed this model through when it only looked at 3D data, when it only looked at 2D, and when it looked at both, and then the baseline being a random initialization with no pre-training. And it shows that it actually does significantly better with a difference of 1 to 2% depending on the task, which is pretty big. And so the next thing they looked at was attention maps at the end of the network to see what exactly these the networks were looking at. And so in this case, for a dimension-specific self-supervised task, you can see that the attention maps are kind of all over the place, and they don't really represent the supervised learning task as well as the USST, which seems to follow the attention maps of the supervised method a lot better, and look at semantically more interesting information in these images. And so the next thing that they looked at was, how does their model compare to other self-supervised learning pre-trained methods, everything from CNN-based ones to transformer-based ones. And so this is kind of a big image. So one thing I'd like to note is that what they are simultaneously looking at is what happens when you train the downsampling tasks on smaller parts of the data. So the idea is that 40% of the original size of the data is randomly sampled and used for downsampling, and seeing what happens during testing, which isn't changed. So in almost every single respect, their method performs a lot better than other methods. And another thing to note too is that while their method is pre-trained on both 3D and 2D images, these other methods, Dino and MoCo in particular, are only trained on one type of modality. So, but they are all trained using the pyramid transformer UNet architecture shown earlier in the paper. So the next thing, the same thing happens when you look at 3D tasks. On almost every respect, their model does a lot better than the other models. And another thing to note too is that this blue arrow indicates how much better it's doing when compared to a random initialization. So from this, we can also gauge that CNN-based self-supervised learning models are not quite as good as the transformer-based ones. And in the transformer-based ones, their architecture does better than the competition. So the next thing they looked at was, in terms of that, the slice volume consistency that was explained before, where it takes both the 3D and the 2D representations to gain global and local information. They wanted to see, does this have any effect on the data? And it has a pretty significant effect, from a 1 to 2% difference, depending on the task being done in 3D. So they've shown that their slice volume consistency is effective. So the next thing to look at is that V value that was explained before, where I was showing that if it's too big or too low, it can really affect training. And they found that in terms of training it on 4 different data sets, the best thing to do would be to pick a size of 2. So they just, I guess, wanted to show that it actually does matter what you do, and it has an effect on accuracy. And so finally, they wanted to see if performance is affected by an unseen data set. So a data set that hasn't been encountered at all through pre-training. And again, it does better than the competition of Dino and MoCo, which are the other transformer-based models on every single metric. And so finally, I just wanted to look at some segmentation results that they provided. And as you can see, when compared to the ground truth, they're gaining a lot more information compared to the rivals. And it's a lot closer than something like Dino, MoCo, or even a random initialization. So it is showing that this pre-training is actually effective when looking at 3D and 2D information at the same time. And so the conclusion that they came up with is that they were able to develop a framework to break the barrier between 2D and 3D pre-training, and that their experimentation shows that it performs other competition like Dino, which was created by Facebook AI. And then as a universal framework, they also posit that instead of just using 3D data, that you could also use something like clinical text. So maybe it's more robust and general than other models available. And so some criticisms I have about the paper is that it does not document a runtime comparison. They say how long it took to train, but they never compared how fast it runs compared with the other methods like Dino. So that was kind of a little bit concerning to me. Another thing is that they use the PTU backbone for every single model. And while that is, good for comparing how effective similar SSL methods are, the original paper for Dino didn't use PTU as a backbone. So I wonder, how would a base level Dino model compare? And to see even if the PTU method, their backbone was effective so that was something that was a little bit concerning to me when I saw it. And then I don't know if this was just the paper I was reading, because it was on arXiv, is that there were some formatting errors in terms of spelling mistakes and referencing incorrect figures. So they would reference figure 8 instead of figure 4 when they were obviously talking about another figure. And so in terms of a paper rating, if we're going by the NIPS metric, I would give it a rating of 1 or 2. I think maybe even a rating of 0, because it's definitely better than the top 50% of papers accepted. The architecture is relatively novel. They explained it pretty well and had a lot of experimentation with a lot of different data sets and tasks. And but although it is missing some potential experimentation that would help bolster their claims that I feel like were necessary but not included. So here are my sources, and that's the end of my presentation.
Okay, so Michael, is it done with the presentation?
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, thank you. So any question, comments from the student?
Can you go to the architecture slide?
Sure.
Well, there may have been more than one.
Yeah.
That one.
Wait,
I think
one
that
right.
one.
This one.
No,
right
no, a little more back.
This one right here.
A little farther back. But the question is, I'm curious, at what point in the architecture is the 3D like patch or token and 2D patch / token put to the same dimension? So it's not this one. I think it
I
might have
think
been
it's
earlier.
here. I think it's the switchable patch embedding, which decides what to do exactly with the specific patch embedding. This was one of the things that they created. And so it's reshaped depending on what the input is. I'm not quite sure how they do it. They explain it, but they don't explain it very well. They kind of just say something that I didn't really quite understand, but I'm just assuming that the way they handle it is, dependent on what you have. It's a little bit complicated, and I don't know if I fully understand it.
Okay, yeah, that is what I was curious
Yeah.
about. So
Yeah, so this
yeah.
is if you look at this is this transformer architecture is just this one with a different patch embedding. So the patch embedding here is like VIT where it's just linear,
Mhm.
but in this case they had to change it because they're using different modalities. So yeah, I think that was one of the big things they had to overcome in order to make this work the way that it does. And also I think at the same time it depending on what you're doing, upsampling or downsampling, I think it changes too, to work kind of like a, and to do one or the other. So yeah, it's a little bit complicated. And I think that is another criticism too, is I don't know if they explain it as well as I hope they would too. I would put that on the criticisms list.
It does look complicated, but you did a pretty good job going through it.
Yeah, I was, because like they gave this sentence on it and it's kind of like they say something like it's just garbage, like leaky Raylu blah 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 com something, and I'm like, I don't know what that means. So yeah, that was one of the things, yeah, that I was just like, oh, okay.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, yeah, I think this one probably that's their strategy for kind of combining or unify these 2D and 3D modality of the data, right? So depending on what kind of input you have, they using this switchable patch embedding, trying to generate patch embedding. So you can go for 2D later process all layers. But since you have the slides here, I do have one question here. So I understand like how they switch between like 2D and 3D input using this kind of patch, switchable patch embedding. But for this self-supervised learning task, like what exactly they are doing? Are they doing contrastive learning, or what is
I think it's contrastive learning.
So you
is
have
my
these-
guess.
So you have this transformer unit, right? You have
Mhm.
this self-supervised learning token. It's not clear like what exactly the yeah, probably contrastive learning. They are doing data augmentation. Okay.
Mhm.
So
I think, yeah.
from the same sample X, they generate using the data augmentation, generate 2 copies X1, X2. Okay.
With I think 2 different transformations,
Yeah,
and then and then it's just kind of the same thing that every contrastive learning thing
because
does.
I see the EMA exponential moving average. It's like a MoCo style training. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, so I think the big things that they came up with in this paper are the pyramid UNet architecture, the switchable patch embedding, and then the slice. I forgot the name. I always forget the name, but this essentially this methodology right here, where they pass both the slices and the volumes in at the same time.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Any other questions, comments? Yeah, I think this paper is pretty interesting, and I think the motivation is good, right? So we have, for this medical image, we have different modalities. 2D and 3D data occupy like a majority of the data and a lot of applications. So yeah, in a way, they unify these two modality of the data, and hopefully, the pre-trained model on these two types of data is able to generalize well on the downstream task, either on 2D data set or 3D data set. Yeah, so I think for this consistency, the slide you show here, like volume to slice, I think they in the ablation study, they show that this volume to slice kind of consistent loss is quite important, right? I think 1 to 2% improvement.
Yeah, I think I have it right here. I think it's that study you're talking about, the
Okay.
when just observing volumes, it's about 1 to 2% difference compared to when you
Okay.
look at both the volumes and the slices together. So yeah, I'd say it's pretty significant if their research or if their findings are genuine. So yeah, which I think they are.
Yeah, okay. So is the code available? Do they have the code available?
Yes, I think they do. I think they do. I might be wrong though. I don't know for certain.
Okay. Because I think it's going to be difficult to implement. So I think it will be good if they release the code and these kind of train model so people can starting to use it.
Yeah, that's one of my biggest, I feel like that should become like a de facto standard, right? Where almost every research paper should have to release their code unless it's proprietary hidden information. But yeah, I mean, it just seems like it's kind of like, how could you make a claim without giving people the resources to accurately like replicate what you did, So
yeah. Okay. Yeah, but I think if you guys interested in this work, you can check out if they have like a GitHub repo, have the code available, maybe dive into more details, because most of the time, a lot of small details they wouldn't mention in the paper. So the best way to understand the whole pipeline is just looking at the code, small details, how they implement this, right? Actually, how to do this kind of switch for patch embedding. So by looking at the code, it's going to be much easier for you to understand the entire pipeline. And on the other note is, I know you guys do a lot of, for the final project, working on, segmentation. A lot of these kind of techniques we learned through the lecture and also these reviewing the paper, right? Self-supervised learning is become more and more popular, especially when you don't have a lot of labeled data. So yeah, you can maybe leverage some of the findings or some of the pre-trained models from this paper that may also help, in your final project, right? If you want to boost some performance, maybe you can take their pre-trained model, and maybe you can try Vision Transformer as well, and to see if you're able to get very good result. So that's just one, recommendation or suggestion for you guys. Okay. Okay, all right. Anyone have any comments, questions, thoughts? Okay. If not, yeah, we can wrap up here. So we do have 5 minutes. So if you have any questions regarding the assignment or project or other things, you can, ask the question now. Okay, no question. All right. So yeah, thank you, Michael. So we're gonna stop here, and then we'll continue the presentation on Thursday. By the way, I will probably sending out the like the sign up sheet for your final project presentation. So the final project presentation will come after the these paper presentation. So I will send you some of the details, instructions, so you can starting to prepare that accordingly. Okay. Okay. All right. Great. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great week. I'll meet you on Thursday. All right. Bye.
Have a good day.